Hello and welcome to the Good Old Days, our program focusing on the history of Rainham. I'm Pat Riley and our host is retired Selectman Don McKinnon. We're back again for another
We're here.
exciting
We're going to keep
episode.
doing it till we get it right.
That's right. We
A
talk
lot
about
of averages on
the
our
history
side.
of Rainham.
That's right. We've
and
got one of the old
sometimes-
timers here today.
Sometimes we talk about current events because today's news is tomorrow's history.
That's right.
Do you want to introduce our special guest?
Well,
Don?
John McGarry, if you're going down the right street and you look up and you see his name on the building, at least you know where John works. He's one of the few guys around that has the name on the building, but his name is on the building. John retired and then was brought out of retirement, and he's going around now, and he's on top of his game as usual. But that's as the sewer commissioner, superintendent.
Superintendent of the John McGarry. Welcome, John. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
joining us.
Thank you.
But he and John Dolan years ago decided to get a Veterans Memorial Committee together. And one of the things they also decided, in the by, was to put signs as best they could, as close to the streets where individuals lived who were killed in action. Is that the correct phrase that
Yes.
we use?
Yeah.
And so since then, John has been championing that. And when he came back from retirement to restore his old position, he started again on these. And what you'll see is it's a regular street sign, which they're about, but also if it's in an area where the individual lived. The one exception to that, of course, would be Jared Monte. His is in the
Center
we
of
call
town.
the center of town. But most of the other signs, your brother's sign, for example, John, is in the neighborhood where he grew up, I believe,
Yes,
or close
right.
enough to it anyway. Yeah. So John is the man who is in charge of that, and as the different names come up through the library and through the historical, he's finding the names of these individuals who lost their lives. And I think, John, we're back to World War II, I believe.
Well, we're just about finished with the World War II series. Yes. Yeah.
The Civil War is the
Is
largest,
next.
probably.
Yeah. So,
How did you first get involved in this, John?
well, as a veteran in the town, I was drafted perhaps in 2009. The Board of Selectmen wanted to put together a Veterans Memorial Committee, and I was drafted along with John Dolan, a veteran, Don McKinnon, a veteran, a few others. We had some non-veterans on the committee that were actively citizens. And our commission was twofold. One was to develop a monument for all veterans in Rainham, and the second thing was to come up with some sort of a memorial street sign program. So as far as the Rainham Veterans Memorial ended up getting located at Town Hall, and
It's
you've seen it.
beautiful. Yes, very nice.
We hired an architect, and he designed that for us. Then we had fundraising over the years. And when we were about ready to go for construction was when I retired. I moved to Florida. And when I came back a few years later, it was nice to see that the project had been completed. Chris Gallagher, I think, took a leadership role in pulling together all that construction management, and it came out very nice.
Now, one of the fundraisers was bricks, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
And they are there at the memorial with different individuals' names.
Yes, a citizen could buy a brick. I think it was $50. They could fill out how they wanted it engraved, who they wanted to dedicate it to, and then when we had a bundle together, we sent it out to the manufacturer. He provided the bricks, he engraved them, and then he furnished them back, and they got embedded in the memorial. And I think our veterans agent still coordinates that effort. If someone wants to
And Randy
dedicate,
Buckner also
Yeah.
helped.
Involved.
Yeah.
Town administrator.
if someone wants
now
to
would be
dedicate a
David
brick,
Flaherty.
they can do that.
Right.
Okay, so that provides ongoing funding for maintenance of that particular memorial.
And
It
it's such
also
a
is that
perfect
they,
location.
yeah, the citizens will come and look for their stone,
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
or look for a neighbor's stone or things they've had. So it's a point of interest now.
Absolutely.
And that was, I'm not sure, John, how many, but at least the second, if not the third location. Originally, we were going to put it in the Borden Colony near the gazebo.
Yes.
And, but the prime location was always the town hall, but there was some problems as to the setbacks and conservation
conservation.
concern and all.
Yeah,
And then finally it was resolved, and that everybody seemed to be
but it's
pleased
a
with
very
the town.
visible site. People come by when they go to town hall for
right.
business, or when they pass on South Main Street. It was a high-traffic
And
volume
there's
street.
flags surrounding and
You
memorials.
see the flags,
Yeah.
and it's low profile, so it doesn't obscure anything else.
Right.
So I
Good
think
deal.
it was a great outcome.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, I was pleased to see how it turned out. So I hope people enjoy that and can always remember the veterans in Rainham and the services that they served under. All flags are represented, including Merchant Marines.
And in buying stones, you don't have to be a veteran to buy a stone, but many of them are veterans. I, for example, purchased a veteran for my father, who was a veteran,
Right.
and two of my uncles who were also veterans, along with my father and my brother, Jack. And so, you know, you buy them for different relatives and friends of that nature, a stone, but it can be for almost anyone. And,
Yeah.
And so that helps fray the cost of maintenance and upkeep.
Sure.
Yeah, it provides perpetual care for the program.
And the Legion is helping out a lot on that, John,
Yeah,
also.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, they maintain the flags,
Right.
maintain the site and so forth, put on the wreaths at the appropriate times during the year.
And now with
And-
Pat's Rave and Sandy Leahy and Pat Riley, the flag now come down to the town.
Isn't it awesome?
It's
you know?
beautiful. It starts in around what we call the center, but the
Right.
four corners. It comes all the way down, and it's really beautiful.
Yeah, Rainham is
We got a
becoming a
really
very...
patriotic town.
Well, I was
Joe.
going to say, it's a very
Yep.
patriotic town. It
Yes.
wasn't like that back in olden days, but it's very nice to see patriotism come back. We remember during the 60s and the 70s when our country had troubles, patriotism wasn't in vogue, the veteran wasn't well received, but now it's very good to see.
Yeah, it is. And you know what? It's kind of contagious, too, because I think as we put the flags up now, you see more and more homes bringing flags
Yeah,
up.
sure.
That's right.
It's a great thing.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Of
the
course,
Excellent.
MacArthur was the one, I think, that said, if you don't want to have your child serve, have an all-volunteer army, but they didn't listen. So Vietnam came along, and they were still drafting, as they did in World War II, but it was a different chemistry of things that happened, and that's why that thing. But now it's all volunteer, John.
Yeah, it is.
Service. Well,
And,
maybe you could give us a breakdown of a
Yes.
couple of these. What we're doing
Well, let
is...
me finish that
Sure.
point there.
Yeah,
It's all volunteer. My daughter is in the Army. She's a lawyer. She's a JAG officer, and she just got
I didn't know
transferred
that, John.
to Egypt. And she's in the Sinai Peninsula as part of the peace agreement in 1979 that Jimmy Carter initiated with Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin. You remember that? So they have a peacekeeping force in the Sinai Peninsula to prevent Egypt from attacking Israel, vice versa. And the U.S. military contingent is a Massachusetts Army National Guard unit, a
Really?
battalion that they mobilized. I think the unit is headquartered out in Western Mass. They're reservists, civilians, and they're in the Sinai Peninsula for a year, okay? So when you hear
Is your
about...
daughter a reservist?
No,
or
she's active
full-time?
duty
She's
military.
full-time,
Yeah.
full-time.
Yeah.
So when you hear about the amount of U.S. Armed Forces we have on active duty, they're supplemented by the reservists. I
right.
spent 20 years in the Marine Corps Reserve, and we never got mobilized for anything, okay? But now it's very frequent,
Yeah.
okay? So the citizen soldier is a real term nowadays.
Because there is no draft,
Yeah.
so there has
Right.
to be
Well, and there's limits on how many you can have on active duty, too, you know? Many are called, few are chosen, and then they supplement them with reservists. And I'm glad that we still have enough civilian reservists are patriotic. They go to work every day, but they weekend warriors, and they're willing to give 6 months or 12 months out of their life and go someplace in the service of their country, and then return to their jobs as a school teacher or a fireman, a
and the
policeman, or
employer
something.
assists them.
Yeah.
The job's there when they come
Right.
back.
Yeah. So it's full engagement now of citizens with our military and,
Right.
and national policy, foreign policy.
Is your daughter's term over that going to be for a specific time, or is it just
Yeah, this is
indefinite?
one year unaccompanied tour
Okay.
for all those soldiers. And they're augmented by soldiers from the UK, Australia, Spain, Italy, etc. So,
It's a UN force. in a
Yes.
way.
multinational force.
sure.
Yeah.
I don't think we realize on a day-to-day basis how many of U.S. people are in the forces, or you said reserves, around the world, really.
Yeah, that's right.
Peacekeeping,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, because
Thank goodness for them.
I wouldn't have known that if my daughter wasn't engaged herself in that effort. So
How long has she been in the service?
she's been in 8 years. She's a
Wow.
captain. She's up for promotion to major now.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So,
So 20 years later, she'll be maybe looking at a pension or not.
well, yeah.
She'll be sitting here. We'll be talking to her.
Well,
That's right.
she can continue this program.
Exactly. But tell us how you're doing with the
Okay.
project.
All right, so part of our task was also to come up with a plan how we could honor Rainham veterans that made the ultimate sacrifice. There was a number of them. We did the research, and we came up with the wars in Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, and in World War II. We didn't have any killed in action in the Korean War. We had one in World War I, and then there's several in the Civil War. So the idea was to see if we could come up with some program to remember them. And so we developed the idea of creating a fallen hero street sign. And we would mount that on a street corner on high visibility, with the concept being that when motorists stopped and waited for the traffic to clear, they could look at the street sign and they could reflect on the courage and sacrifice that these young men from their own community made, so that we could enjoy freedom in our own hometown here. And also, walking pedestrians could stop when they look at this across the street. They could look up and see it. So we did. Our first series was 6 for fallen heroes in Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. And then we did 6 more for what I called our World War II series, and that was we did these 6 locations here at various parts around town. And the way we handle it is I make a presentation at the Board of Selectmen's meeting. I do the research with some other members of the Rainham Veterans Memorial Committee. We come up with a story on the fallen hero, and then we present the street sign, and we ask the Board of Selectmen if they'd authorize the highway superintendent to erect the sign. And what I have one of our signs here. People viewing this program have probably seen these signs up. I have one sign that's going to be erected at the intersection of Center Street and Route 138 Broadway after that traffic signalization is completed.
Very nice.
And this particular one happens to be for Seaman First Class Augustus C. Oliver, Jr. He was a World War II veteran of the Navy. He was only 18 when he died. I have his story, if I may. Would you allow me to read his story?
Yes.
Okay. And so that people can get,
Very nice.
so the viewers can get an idea of what some of these young men went through. So,
And if our viewers, when they're riding around town, can take a look and
That's
notice these.
yeah. So this is the story that we developed on Seaman First Class Augustus C. Oliver, Jr., United States Navy. He was born in Rainham, Mass. On February 27, 1926. He was the son of Augustus C. and Ann V. Britton Oliver. Augustus had 5 sisters and no brothers. Prior to enlisting, Augustus worked with his father operating the former Oliver's General Store in Rainham. And I believe some people might remember that, old-timers. Augustus enlisted for the duration of the war in the United States Navy in Boston. He was assigned serial number 2056215. Seaman First Class Oliver was assigned to the ammunition ship USN Hood, AE-11. She was the lead ship of her class of ammunition ships for the United States Navy in World War II. She was the first ship named after Mount Hood, a volcano in the Cascade region in Oregon. She set sail on her maiden voyage on August 21st, 1944, loaded with a full hold of ordnance for the troops in the Pacific. She arrived in Manus on September 22, 1944, and began supplying the ships destined for the Philippine invasion. On the morning of November 10, 1944, the USN Hood was anchored in about 35 feet of water in Seidler Harbor at Manus Island. It was loaded with 3,800 tons of ordnance material. At 8:55 in the morning, the ship exploded, killing the entire crew. The ship was obliterated while also sinking several or severely damaging 22 smaller craft nearby. Seaman First Class Oliver's remains, along with his 350 shipmates, were never recovered. 82 sailors from adjacent ships were also killed in the explosion. A Navy inquiry was convened to investigate the explosion, but was unable to ascertain the exact cause of the blast. A tablet was erected in the Manila American Cemetery, Manila, Philippines, in commemoration of the lost crew. Seaman First Class Oliver was only 18 when he died.
Waste.
He received the following military awards for his honorable service: Purple Heart Medal with White Cross Distinguishing Device to denote a posthumous award, American Campaign Medal, Asiatic Pacific Campaign Medal, World War II Victory Medal. The Route 104 bridge over Route 495 in Rainham is named after Seaman First Class Augustus C. Oliver, Jr., United States Navy. Seaman First Class Oliver's family home was at 120 Broadway, near what is now Walmart. The Oliver General Store was located near Mel's Diner, and for this reason it is appropriate that his Fallen Heroes sign be erected on Broadway at the highly visible intersection with Center Street.
Very nice.
So that's an example of the research and the story that we put together to put a personal touch
Yes.
on the sacrifice of our fallen heroes. And it's an example of how a young man, he was only 18 years old, back in those hard times of World War II. He left his home. He ended up being on the other side of the world. He never came back again, and never a sign of him. It's a terrible tragedy that that those parents and family members went through in a terrible sacrifice for our country. So that's just one fallen hero street sign. And we have, initially we had 6. This World War II series that I showed was 6 more, so we're going to have 12 erected. I have 2 more World War II heroes, 1 World War I hero. I'm writing those stories now with the assistance of Eden Ferguson, a great researcher at the Rainham Library. And then we start with our Civil War series. We have 12 to 15 Civil War veterans of Rainham that were killed in action. I haven't got into that research yet, but that's going to be interesting. And it would be my hope, my goal to create fallen hero signs for them too. A little history, spotted all over town.
Civil War, interesting, because what did you say, how many, John, 12, 14? In Civil War.
Yeah.
And yet the population of the town was probably at that time 3,000.
Yep.
So it was very, very small. So we had losses in numbers that Civil War was an extraordinary number of casualties, it seems.
Yep.
And for a small town, we certainly had our share of volunteers and our share of people that we lost. We had 1 Medal of Honor come out of that.
But such a great project, John, because many people would never know these names.
Yep.
You know, and it's certainly for the sacrifice they made, we should all know them.
So I want to tell you another part of the documentation, Pat, if I can. We have the sign up in the stories I read at the selectmen's meeting, but they would be lost forever if it wasn't for the efforts of Randy Buckner, retired Chief Peter King, and Eden Ferguson at the Rainham Library. We know that Chief King is our town photographer. He does a wonderful job. He comes to all the public events and documents those for history. And what he did was he put together all the stories that we had developed from 2009, and he mounted them on the street sign so that so these have been documented. It shows the street sign, it shows the fallen hero, and this is the story. Now, he collaborated with the Rainham Library, and he gave these to the Rainham Library, and Eden Ferguson has documented these. She's a supporter of the program, and she has a book put together with all these stories. Okay,
nice.
so someone can go there, they can ask. She's also mounted them on the website, and if anyone wants to access these without going to the library, they can go on the internet and come up with the Rainham Library website. You can select local, then you select Rainham history, and then you scroll down to Fallen Hero Project, and it will come up with a list of all the fallen heroes. You can double click on the name that you're interested in, and you can read the story like I just read about Seaman Oliver's story. Okay, so it's Rainham history of fallen heroes, and thankfully it's going to be available to everyone in the future.
Excellent.
Thanks to their
Yeah, these are
historical
one of the
efforts.
things that we're trying with the Historical Commission and the Society to set up either a museum or an office in the town hall that will have various historical documents that people can view if they choose to, and take it out if they wish. But
Yep.
and that
Absolutely.
certainly
Copies of
is.
these would be great.
That's
yeah.
right. That's right.
Absolutely.
And all the way back to the Civil War. John said, "We're not going to go back to the Revolutionary." He said, "Donald, stop. Stop
Yeah,
it right now."
I don't know if we had any, did it?
Oh,
Do we have anyone in our committee that could contribute to that?
Well, I was very young at the time, but I have some memory. Not of the Mayflower now. I've spread that rumor, but
Is it difficult to do the research, John?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because I was just thinking of a thought that I wanted to share in the research. Thanks to the internet, a lot of the history is available now. For instance, if I can key on to what unit the soldier was with, then you can follow that unit in World War II. You can plug that soldier into that unit after he joined the service, when he joined the unit, and take it right through the balance of the Civil War, for instance. I just finished a story where a young man, Corporal Haskins, joined a unit. They had to rush to the front into the Ardennes forest just before the Battle of the Bulge, and he went through the Battle of the Bulge, and then he lost his life at the end of it. Okay, so you can plug into his unit and then do the research and follow it right through. Now, there was another interesting story where there was a fallen hero who was in the Army Air Corps, and his plane crashed after a bombing mission over Germany as they were in their final approach to landing in England. And the plane collided with another B-24. And this Rainham resident lost his life in this crash. But the guy that was sitting beside him did not lose his life. He bailed out, he survived, and he wrote the story. And he actually mentioned our Rainham resident in the story.
Really?
Okay?
Wow.
Because the Rainham resident took the parachute and handed it to him. He put the parachute on and jumped out.
wow.
Our Rainham resident reached back for his own parachute, and the orientation of the plane did not enable him to get out. Okay? So he actually had that story on the internet.
Yeah,
You're
he
able
laid
to
down
read
his
that and
life
say,
for his
"Geez,
friend,
bro,
which
this is
is-
like this was an eyewitness account."
Wow.
Yeah. So it's remarkable.
It doesn't get more difficult the further back you go to get information? I would think it would, yes. Like if you're trying to find things about Civil War?
Well, Eden Ferguson says the Civil War is easy because there's so much documented on the Civil War. I
Really?
haven't got into it, but
Yeah.
hopefully I'll be able to key into the unit, go to the battle,
Right.
and come up with stuff. Also, our town clerk has original documents from the Civil War that she keeps in her safe. So I hope to find some gems in there when I open up those books.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
stay
the clerk
tuned.
has things that people, I remember years ago, I gave my daughter information on the town meeting prior to declaring independence, and then after declaring independence, the different wordage for the town meeting. And it's, now we're supposed to send it into the state, so naturally we didn't.
Because we'd never get it back.
No, we'd never get it back, nor a thank you note. So that is sitting in the safe, and one
Really?
of them now, Helen Lounsbury at the time made it available to my daughter Laura. And she wrote a paper on it, so naturally the paper's gone, but not the historical documents that Helen Lounsbury had, they have that. So you're right, John. There's things that, evidently this young lady in the library is very helpful, and she's able to research some of it. But also the town clerk and things of that nature are available now on them.
Excellent.
John, you, in your showing of one of them was your brother, who was a lieutenant in the Vietnam War, I believe.
Right, he was a Marine lieutenant.
And
he was
lost
killed
his-
in action.
Lost his life.
Yep.
And there were, there's so many problems with the Vietnam War that now you go back and, they're making the closing for all of Macy's, and it's like we were never there. So, but a life is a life, and a life lost, you never know what was going to go on. Often I used to give the talk of John Truckee. I don't know if you remember John. He lived on South Main Street, John, and he worked the farm. And John was the one who helped a young man named George Bush, whose plane was shot down, and he was floating around the middle of the Pacific. So you say you never know
Right.
what someone's going to. There's a guy that was, his submarine
Wow.
didn't surface and didn't find that little boat going around there in the middle of the Pacific. It's one of the presidents, and his son was the president, and he's still about, George. John passed about 15 years ago, I believe now. And they were going to invite him out to the White House, but they never got it. They did send him a letter. I would have to check the family and see whether historically we can get a hold of that, by the way, because the family's still about. And he's a member of the Truckee family.
Might just mention, Don, obviously you got things started as far as eventually having Gilmore Hall as a museum for the town. And the reason for that is if people have historical items,
That's right.
whether it's documents or mementos or whatever, we want to start
And we
collecting
got to get it
those.
now
We don't
before it
wanna
goes
lose
to the
those.
landfill. That's the key, because, people inherit, they're well-meaning, and away it goes in a box. And we got to get it into that museum before we go.
And your project's going to be really nice.
And that is very much a part of it, of course, if we may avail ourselves of
Well,
that.
thanks to the Rainham Public Library for documenting
And
this.
thanks to you
Absolutely,
and
absolutely.
John
That's
Dolan,
great.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for all you've done.
And we are, believe it or not, just about out of time, but you are going to be continuing with this project.
Sure.
And people should just watch those street signs going up.
Yep, yep,
Excellent.
happy to do it.
I'm going to check
Excellent.
some of my
Worthwhile
friends,
project.
see
Oh,
if
great.
anybody alive during the Revolutionary War. I think, well, it's interesting because there was a guy, I walk every morning, was a guy there, and he said, "What's the name of that cemetery?" I said, "Shaw's Cemetery." And he said, "Oh, named after the store." I said, "No, not named after the store."
That's what you call fake news. And
Yeah.
at that point, we're out of time. So thank you all for joining us. Our guest today, John McGarry, and we will see you here on our next episode of The Good Old Days.
And John's a legend in himself because he's got a